Hi folks. Today I'd like to quickly show you some of the new features in MapForge version 1.0.7, which was just released. One of the first changes you'll notice in the interface is that the drop-down menu that was in the top right corner has been replaced with these 4 buttons: tiles, tile overlays, items, and textures. Those are the different media types you can work with. And not only that, it also shows you which types of media the current add-on contains. In this case, the Mapping Basics add-on contains tiles, does not contain tile overlays, that's blacked out, contains items, and it contains textures. If I switch with the tab key, I switch to another add-on, you'll see this one doesn't contain any items, but it contains all the other media types. The Jade Halls of Nice contains all the media types. It's the only free add-on to contain all of them. So I think you're going to find this a lot quicker to just click on a button and select the media type than it would be if you had to select an entry from a pull-down menu. Here I've loaded up a map that I started working on that happens to contain tiles and tile overlays and items, because I wanted to show you something you can do with these buttons. Basically, it lets you hide a particular media type that you aren't interested in working with right now. For example, if I don't want to work with items, I can just shift click on this button and all the items will disappear, letting me focus on the other types. For example, here I've got this little overlay, and these stairs, they're tile overlays. I'm going to hide those by shift clicking this button. And I'm left with just tiles that I'm viewing right now. And that can speed up the whole workflow if it speeds up the redraws. I can hide the tiles too if I want. Show the tile overlays by shift clicking that, show the items, and show the tiles. Now let's say I'm working with this add-on, Mapping Basics. You'll see that tile overlays doesn't contain any, so it's blacked out. You can still click on the button though, in case you want to work with the select tool and interact with a tile overlay. Like I wanted to move these stairs, I could. So just because it's blacked out doesn't mean you can't use it. Another change is in the map settings screen. You can now change your values, and as soon as you hit the enter key, it's the same effect as hitting the apply button. You didn't have that choice before, but now you can. One of the major new features in this update is support for randomly generated maps that are made on the Donjon website. You can access the site right from within MapForge. And I suggest using small or even tiny dungeons for your first efforts, just to learn the ropes. And the important thing is to download this TSV map. It's just a text file that gets downloaded to your hard drive. Once you have that TSV file, just go here, load the Donjon TSV file. I happen to have one here, ready to test. And it quickly processes the whole map and draws it for you in MapForge's format, which is higher res than you can get from Donjon, whatever resolution you've set your map to, and it's also editable. And let's see how that works. So let's say you want to edit this map layout. Maybe I don't like this hallway here. I'm going to click on the fill tool. This shows me a preview of what's going to be stamped down, and I just click that hallway away. And you don't have to click one grid square at a time. You can just click and drag and it'll automatically generate or erase the corresponding walls to close off an area. So say I want to make this into a room, I click on Dig, and it's going to put floor there. Now this is just the default colors. You can change the solid color if you don't like that blue. Maybe you want to change it to black. And maybe you want to change the floor color to, I don't know, kind of a stone gray. And the walls, maybe a lighter gray. Where it starts to get interesting is if you click on this button, Apply Wall Effects, it'll apply the default effects that you can customize if you don't like them, but it basically adds like a black glow shadow all around. And that goes a long way to improving the appearance. Now, with the filters enabled, things kind of tend to slow down a lot. You lose a lot of frame rate. So what I've done is I like to disable the filters while I work and then just turn them back on when I'm ready. So there's a hotkey, Command F on Mac, Control F on Windows, that will toggle the visual effects on or off. And that's exactly the same thing as selecting this menu item, Toggle Filter Effects. So if you have them off, you can do quick edits. Oh, that doesn't go anywhere now. For a much nicer look, you can apply textures to the different elements. Here I'm going to add a texture to the solid layer. And this is a default texture that comes with, it's built into MapForge, so even if you don't have any add-ons installed, it's still available. Let's change the floor texture now. I have to turn on this radio button. And that's actually the same texture applied to it, but it looks okay once you've got the shadow effects on. And the wall texture, you can leave some of these set to color if you like that. Doesn't look like much without the filters. Let's turn the filters back on. I'm going to turn off the filters for a moment and switch to another add-on to look for a better texture. I like this one. Just click on the texture you want. In this case I've got floor selected, so it's going to apply that texture to the floors. And that's a little on the large side, so you can change the scale of the texture to something more to your liking. That's better. And I'm actually going to use the same texture on the walls. Even smaller. And we'll turn the effects back on to see how that's going to look. Not bad at all. Now these are just the default filter settings. You can customize them, as I said. If you apply filters to the ground layer, that's going to be the solid area. I'm going to adjust the colors on this. Turn the brightness way down, and maybe turn the contrast down a bit, and the saturation. Make it almost a grayscale map. So you can see without that effect applied and with that effect applied. So I like the way that looks. Doors are placed as items. They're automatically placed from the TSV file. But if you select one, it's actually a multi-token item. You just use hotkeys to switch to different symbols for locked doors, trap doors, portcullises, or a regular door. And if you want, you can just delete it and leave an archway in place. And if you prefer, you can also place more realistic doors of your own choosing. I think I've got one in this add-on. I'm going to rotate the door, turn off snap to grid, and place the door there, and turn the filters back on. Now if you ever want to get back to the built-in textures that come with MapForge, you can shift click on one of these layers, on one of these buttons. For example, solid, well, it's already set. Floor, if I shift click it, and walls, I can shift click. Now you don't have to start a map with a Donjon TSV file if you want to use the build tools. You can just use them on your own to create a map from scratch. It's basically a whole new mapping style. If you shift click on the fill tool, it'll fill the entire map with the solid color or solid texture. And then you can just use the dig button to carve away at the solid and create whatever structure you want. You can also use your own textures to add to the program if you don't want to use the textures in the add-ons. I'm going to import a texture using the Import Art button. And I've got some texture stored away here. I'm going to use this. Use it as a texture. There we go. And I'm going to use a similar texture for the walls. I can actually just drag and drop without using the Import Art button first. Whoops, forgot to turn on textures. I'll use this for the floor. Select floor, select texture, select import, and drag this in. Update. There we go. So it's the beginnings of a nice sci-fi map. Now sometimes you're not going to want the grid overlay on top of the solid area, so you can actually toggle that in the options menu. There's a new command for toggle the grid height, and so the grid is either going to be over the solid area or under it. Right now it's clearly over it, so selecting this command will put the grid underneath the solid. And this is what the finished map might look like if I made this into, say, a storeroom of some sort. Next, I'd like to show you a new filter effect, tinting, which is available in this version. I'm going to stamp down this magic item or magic portal or whatever from Jade Halls, and I'm going to apply some filters to it. Wait a minute. I'm going to select it first. And it's located here in Other Effects. Colorize. And what I suggest is that you, rather than use the color picker here, which really ideally you'd have to use the hue, saturation, and brightness picker to get reasonable results, but it's hard to preview, so I suggest rather than doing it this way, just click the checkbox here and then go to Adjust Color. This will let you change the hue interactively and you can preview your results. So I want to make this look like, I don't know, like a yellow-orange fire effect. Let's see if we can achieve that. There we go. And the other new filter is Sharpen. This is a slow filter, so use it sparingly, but it can bring out extra detail, especially if you downsize objects a lot and they start to get muddy. Throwing in a little Sharpen can help. These up and down arrows will change the value a value of 1 every time you click, but if you hold down the Shift key, it'll change by 0.1. So I'm holding down the Shift key now and adjusting it by 0.1 increments. You can toggle the filters off to see how we started. That's the original graphic. Turn the filters back on, we can see how it looks with all the effects. Pretty cool. When you're making a map with the dig and fill tools, you can have it auto assign the walls. Just by default, it'll do that. Or you can manually specify the walls. You can use the arrow keys, up, down, left, or right, to designate which wall should be enabled on your stamp. So here I'm going to press up arrow to activate the north wall, and you can see it in my preview and in my stamp preview here. Left arrow, right arrow, down arrow. Actually, let me turn that off. So I just want 3 walls, so when I stamp, it only puts those 3 walls. And if I stamp again, it'll put down exactly what you've specified, unless you have no walls turned on. If you turn off all the walls, then it will automatically do the walls for you. So that's, for example, if you wanted an internal wall, you just turn that on. Whoops. Turn that on. And actually, that's a good excuse to show you this other tool, this eyedropper. If you click on that, you can pick up all the settings from a particular grid square. So I'm going to click on this one, and it shows me that only the north wall is turned on there. So I'm going to click on that again, but first I'm going to turn on the right wall and the southern wall. There. So now I've got my internal wall looking the way I wanted it to. Let's do that again for this cell here. I want to turn on the south wall to make it thicker. And do that for this cell. And I want to turn on the south wall. Click. Okay, if you ever want to clear away everything you've stamped, you can do so from the Edit menu. Clear all build cells. And you're back to square one. Okay, one last feature I want to show is for exporting. There's a new option. Suppose this was an actual map and I wanted to export it, and suppose I made this with assets that are for personal use only, but I'd still like to show off my work to someone. So now there's an option that supports that. Let's go to Export Map. Because I'd selected an area, it's automatically checked off here that it's only going to export that area. And this new option is this, Prep for Public Posting. Now this is normally a 200 pixel per grid square map, but if I check this off, it's going to reduce it to 50 dpi output, low resolution, which is fine with the content creators if you post such work. And let's go ahead and export that. Let's call this Post on Public Forum. Okay, let's take a look at what we exported. And voila. This is actual resolution, 50 pixels per grid square. And at the bottom here, it's going to put a little watermark or logo thing, a little badge. And this is perfectly okay to post on a public forum. So basically this is a little bit of a trade-off. On the one hand, you're being allowed to publicly post works that are theoretically only for personal use, but on the other hand, you're helping us to promote the software and the content add-ons, and hopefully the artists will sell more content because of the extra exposure. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. There's a lot more to play around with. I couldn't cover every single new feature, but hopefully this will get you started. Enjoy!